All right, so we're going in. Woman, woman, woman. That's what we discuss. Issues affecting her, issues she's facing, and everything that concerns the woman. We discuss that every Wednesday from 11 to 11:50 right here on Smooth 98.1. And that is one of my favorite songs by Nene Cherry that is titled Woman. So officially, you're welcome to Soul Sisters right here. If you are new to the show, well, I have just given you a background into what we discuss and the time when you can catch it here on Smooth 98.1. We stream live to keep a record and to allow you watch it at a time of your choosing. So what you need to do to access that opportunity is for you to go to youtube.com/smooth 91 FM Lagos. Again, youtube.com/smooth 91 FM Lagos. If you have been listening before now, that means you would have heard that today, 31st of May, 2023, on the show Soul Sisters, we will be discussing something to commemorate the World Menstrual Hygiene Day that was on the 28th of May, 2023. And I told you that 28th of May, 2023, or 28th of May every year is chosen because it signifies 28 days of the woman's cycle and the 5 days of menstruation she experiences typical. Some do have it lesser or beyond, but then typically 5 days. So that's why you have it on the 28th of the 5th month of each year. It started in 2014. And part of the issues that the day is aimed at addressing has to do with everybody accessing and affording menstrual product. In fact, the overarching goal is that by 2030, there will be a world, or we will be in a world where no one is held back just because they menstruate. So some of the things we'll be discussing this morning, from what period poverty is, if you have never heard of that phrase before, what period stigma is, and some other things that you should understand better about the anatomy of a woman and what she experiences. Maybe some other things you have heard about menstruation. Will they be myths or they are facts? That is what we intend to do this morning. And of course, I will not be doing that alone. I have joining me via Zoom a family doctor, and she is the medical director in charge of Total Family Specialist Hospital, which is at Ibadan. So she's joining me via Zoom. Please make welcome Dr. Folu Olaniyi-George. Good morning. Are you there? Oh, no.
Hello, good morning. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining. All right, it's a pleasure to have you here. Totally a pleasure. Thank you for joining all the way from Ibadan. Yes, I hope everything is good there. You're not having to deal with extra fuel scarcity, right? Can you hear me?
I mean, I think that's a national issue right now. So we're not exempted. Ibadan is also feeling the pinch.
All right, then. Well, hopefully it gets better. But that is not the topic of discussion this morning. It's about the woman and her health. But before we get settled, let's take a short break. And when we come back, we will be jumping right into the discussion, starting with what period poverty is, and then period stigma and the other things that a woman experiences when she is menstruating. Stay with us because you are listening to Smooth 98.1. The show is called Soul Sisters. Let me just fix this.
Morning is an opportunity to take your hustle to the next level. So start every day with a great tasting cup of Nescafe.
Okay. So this sounds better. I want to believe.
Sugar with that rich creamy taste you love.
I think you're muted.
Strong and make every morning count.
Okay, great. How about my video?
This is perfect. Thank you. This is better.
Perfect?
Yeah, it is.
All right. But I mean, I have a very unstable
network.
Yes, so I just hope it behaves.
It has to, for our sakes. It has to. All right, we're coming in.
Okay.
Of course, you know you can do that. What you need to do is stay tuned to Smooth 98.1. We are your traffic companion. We are your productivity companion. We also educate you and we keep you informed and entertained as well. And we've got everything for you. So right now we are educating you on the topic of menstruation. Yes, you will hear that a lot of times this morning. So get comfortable with it. I have my guest joining me via Zoom, and you can watch us on YouTube. You can save the video, you can share with your friends and go back to that video later. It is youtube.com/smooth921 FM Lagos. She is a family doctor and her name is Dr. Folu Olaniyi-George. So let's start with the basics. So I said it earlier that part of the aim of the World Menstrual Hygiene Day is to eradicate and to bring discussions to the fore that talk about period stigma, period poverty. So let's start with the basics. How do you define period poverty? Are you there, Dr. Foluke?
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you. Thank you for that question, and thank you for the introduction that you gave as well. This is an issue that is recently coming to the front burner, and very rightly so, because at least half, most reports state that the population of the world is slightly, more female than male, but at least half of the world, actually goes through this period of menstruation at points, in our lives, and it's more or less a travesty, that more attention hasn't been paid to something that happens so naturally to so many people. So period poverty, like you asked, is actually the inadequacy or the lack of access to safe, hygienic products that are supposed to be used for the menstrual period. And it's not limited to products alone, but in addition to that, there's poverty of, for instance, a conversation, just like you alluded to, conversation to ideas, poverty of some sort of maybe even interest, okay, around it. And like I said earlier, it's unthinkable that that kind of thing should have been allowed to persist for so long. And it's very remarkable and commendable that people are now talking more about it. So period poverty, in essence, is when you have a situation whereby people do not understand, they don't have ability to educate themselves about their periods, neither do they have materials that are adequate, safe, accessible, affordable, to be able to take care of themselves during that very important and physiological, which means natural time, of their lives. Yeah.
Thank you. That is quite multi-thronged. So in other words, it's not just about the physical or the financial access to such product, also the mental, awareness of it. And that's interesting. Okay. So now moving over to period stigma. I mean, that sounds explanatory, but I want you to give the lay definition to what it is, such that someone who has no idea of what it is, or maybe they have been doing it or have been guilty of it and they did not know. So help educate someone on what period stigma is.
Yeah, so period stigma stems from, the definition I gave of period poverty. And what I mean that it stems from it is that because of the way menstrual period has been ignored, when people talk about it, or when people are actually having their menstrual period, you find a situation whereby there is some sort of distaste attached to conversations about it, some shame, attached to discussions around it, or trying to put it on the back burner, trying to ignore it and, try to just wish it away, So somebody, for instance, who happens to be menstruating can't even say it openly that, okay, I can't come because I'm on my period. We tend to, even as females, we kind of contribute to the period stigma by not being able to speak openly about it. You said earlier, even when you started the program, that if you are feeling funny about the way I said it, you need to get used to it. So women also contribute to it because we say things like, oh, it's a code red, or,
Anti-flow.
my aunt. Exactly, things like that. My aunt is visiting or something, and why you just in the same way as we encourage children to speak openly, for instance, about body parts so that they get to come to terms with their sexuality. This is something similar. We want people to speak up about their menstrual periods, challenges that they experience. And when they don't do that, they contribute to the shroud of mystery, that cloaks it. And at the end of the day, discussions about it seem as if they don't belong in public space. They don't belong in proper, places. It's a kind of a dark cloud affair. So that is period stigma, and it's pervadent virtually everywhere.
Thank you so much. One of the reasons why we're talking about this is, like Dr. Folu rightly mentioned, it is the consequences. You can't even imagine the consequences. I'll tell you one of the things I read. So there was a girl who was recorded to have recorded her first period on her way to school. I think she was about 10 or 11, Indian girl, and she started crying. In fact, when she saw the blood between her legs on her way to work, school, she started crying and ran back home because she thought she was dying as a result of cancer. So when the information is not out there, when the ones who are experiencing it for the first time do not have the right information, or the ones who are supposed to educate them are shy to talk about it, you can't even imagine the consequences. Imagine someone who has no idea of what she's going through, tries to stop it using some clothes, and then she could get infected. That is just ugly. And that is part of the reasons you have World Menstrual Hygiene Day and discussions like this. So thank you so much, Dr. Folu, for that. Now, let's go over to part of the things that can be done or put in place first with the individual to help stem the tide of this period stigma and move into period poverty. But first, let's start with period stigma. What can the individual do?
Okay, so for the individual, and I presume that by the individual, you mean the woman or the female?
Anyone listening, the boy, the girl, the men, the women, that's what. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so it's important, first of all, to educate ourselves. Knowledge is power, and in this case, it's extremely powerful. When you first of all understand that this is a physiological event, and by that I mean it's an event that it happens as a normal body function. It's not a dysfunction in any form. It is, and it's we had I want to say we have a culture. I haven't seen it being practiced or heard of it being practiced very much nowadays, but I know that I read about it in books and all that, and my mom told me to, that when a young lady attained menarche, and that's the medical term for starting your menstruation. So when a young lady attained menarche, there would be celebration. In fact, a chicken or a fowl will be killed,
yes,
to celebrate, that event, a form of a coming of age. And it's just about the ability to now realize that yes, you have passed a particular rite of womanhood, and you are also contributing to the earth, or able to contribute, to the earth, renewing itself, and we first, and that's why I'm saying that we need to educate ourselves that this is not just, is it a physiological function, but it's such an important one, that the earth itself, humanity itself will cease to be if women don't attain menarche, if women don't menstruate, So it's something that needs to be celebrated. Then talking about families, for instance, it's important that we celebrate our girl children, in their natural state when they attain it. Let them understand what they're going through. You talked about not being informed prior to the event. That's practically criminal, because nobody will want to see blood coming out of any orifice of his or her body. Just imagine blood coming out of the ears or the nostrils or the mouth. It's horrendous, it's scary. But if you have the information beforehand, you are able to, as the person that is going through the event, also celebrate it, also feel happy, feel fulfilled, and even probably even thank God that, wow, I'm able to have this event in my life. And what the men, thank God you said that men are also important. Because as a boy child, we need to normalize the discussion, even in the home, normalize the discussion about periods in the home. Let the children or the family members who are males understand that this is a normal event. Let them also talk about the challenges that women go through during that period. Let them also participate in purchasing materials for their siblings. You have a boy child, let him also assist in purchasing products that his sister is going to use, or that even his mother, you understand, will use. That will help. I'm sorry, I hope I'm still connected, because
yes, you're
I can
here.
see that
I can hear
it's
you.
a bit of. Okay, yeah. So let the males also participate. Let the discussion be free flowing, and remove any secrecy about it. Prior to what we have today, it was only females that were talking to their the mothers that were talking to their girls about it. Why can't a father explain to his daughter, about menstruation? I mean, you have a wife, you are benefiting from the menstruation that she goes through every month. So why can't you explain to your daughter? And then when a man explains to his daughter, then it breaks the myth, it demystifies it. You understand? And let it not be something that, oh, it's only girls that must hear about it. Boys should not see it. Boys should not know. No, all those are things that will perpetuate, negative thoughts about it, and also the myths. But once you bring it out into the open and expose it, then everything becomes clear. Then, of course, society, also we have various societal vices and thoughts that will make menstruation seem unclean. This could be in form of culture, in forms of religion, where they'll say somebody menstruating cannot come, cannot participate, cannot cook, cannot touch. All these things need to be done away with. They are definitely prehistoric, and they have no place in advanced or modern society. Then, of course, when you talk about organizations, industry, yes, people like you, what you're doing, raising awareness, bringing the conversation out there. I mean, it needs to be spoken about. There's so many challenges that women face in and around issues pertaining to menstruation. Many of these things, like I said, have been mysterious before. But let's talk about it. Let's talk about the cramps. Let's talk about the fact that some women can actually menstruate for longer than is expected. And this can cause them to be weak. This can cause them to, not function properly at work. Shouldn't there be some level of concern, for them? Shouldn't there be some policy in place to say that, okay, during this period, you can get some sort of leeway if you need to? Then what about, you asked about period poverty. You have a situation whereby most of the girls in sub-Saharan Africa, and countries like ours across the world, and by that I mean low and middle income countries, many girls can't even go to school during their periods because they don't have the money to buy the products. We don't even need to look as far as that. Just under our noses here, where you have young girls who are working as house helps. The level of many times abuse, neglect that they suffer. Who do you think is going to buy period products for them? A house help. So there was this video I saw recently of a girl that was being beaten severally because she did something wrong. A very little girl. You can imagine such a child needing period products and going to the person who employed her. How do you think she's going to be, responded to? So we just in and around, us. We don't need to look too far. Right where we are, let's look around. See schools, public schools. Yeah, public schools. Some children will not come to school because they are on their period and they don't have the right products to make them comfortable. Some will even have the products, but you go to these schools, there are no restrooms. You know, you can imagine having your period, how many times sometimes you want to bathe 3-4 times a day. Even to change, the privacy to change might not be there, you know, because there are no proper bathrooms. Or what about water? The bathrooms may be available. What do they have water? Do they have water that they can use to wash up and clean up? Then what about disposal? You know, do you carry the used pad around with you in your bag? Do you throw it there and everybody knows that comes after you knows that, oh, Janet was the one that just came out of the bathroom. It must have been her that dropped the period product in the trash can. You know, those are issues that really, really need attention, and we are the ones, you know, that can bring a change.
Thank you so much for that clear explanation, very lucid thought and very helpful. I hope somebody who is listening is getting educated, and you can send your thoughts, questions, whatever it is you like to say, or whatever it is that is on your mind. You can send it as a WhatsApp message to 0809 444 0981. Again, 0809 444 0981. Quick, short breather. When we come back, we will continue and then talk about cramps. Yes, there needs to be that discussion. Yes, you're listening to Soul Sisters on Smooth 98.1.
My name is IBK Spaceship Boss. Spaceship, I inspire my world through music. 98.1. Love music, love rap. Stay tuned. Guy, we know that they saw this airtime, credit and data, buy for this cashless weather. That's nothing now. They have not been calling me for digital for nothing. When that cash be my handle or you know deal, that's why I just buy airtime, credit and data straight from my bank account. Thanks to
So when we come back, we will start with some of the myths and misconceptions about period. For instance, okay, we will start with your take on pads being free instead of condoms. And then we move over to tampon use and people who think if they use a tampon, it will mark the end of their virginity and some other myths. And then we'll talk about cramps and everything that happens during menstruation.
Star 777 hash.
Okay. Is that?
That's fine.
And this is Smooth 98.
And you're listening to Soul Sisters right here on the station that loves music and loves life. We are your #1 adult contemporary radio station. And right now we are having a discussion that is not just for adults, but for everyone, which is on menstrual hygiene, menstruation, period poverty, period stigma, and your part, what you need to do to help somebody and help yourself as well as your family. There is a comment from Charles Chidozie on WhatsApp who says, "This is certainly not a topic I'm shy about because I have a niece, 2 sisters, and a girlfriend. Therefore, it gives me pleasure to pick up 1 or 2 information that might be helpful for them. So I am all ears. Thank you so much." And then he goes further to say, we call it grandma. Grandma is around, is an inside joke no one understands. Wow. Okay. Then Cruz says, "I think we're still majorly a society that is shy about talking biology in public, not to mention being bold enough to discuss periods, sexual awareness, and co. We really don't see the link between it being educational and improved lifestyles and general public health that affect us all, male and female. We hear Red Army or Granny Red. Don't ask me how I know." Interesting. Now, moving on to more issues about this. Still on the issue of period poverty, there have been many people who say that pads should be given free and not taxed. You know, there is such a thing called pink tax, but we'll go back to that later on, maybe not today. But before that, we're talking about pads. Do you think, Dr. Folu, that pads should indeed be made free as opposed to condoms and other pregnancy preventive, what's the word now? Those things that prevent pregnancy or contraception avenues? I like the word, yeah.
Okay, thank you for that question. I don't think it's a case of either or. I'm not sure there is basis for saying, for instance, that condoms should now be paid for, because indeed some people buy condoms You understand? Although, yes, a number are given out for free. But the point that needs to be made, yes, is that a number of people who need this cannot afford it. And it affects, significantly affects not just their physical state, but also their mental state in terms of their self-esteem, their confidence levels, being able to perform, and we're talking about the most vulnerable now. I'm talking about even children, adolescents, you understand? So if it's a situation whereby maybe older women alone are affected, that might be a bit different. But we're talking here about adolescents, people who don't have agency, you understand, who cannot decide to divert their resources to things that they need. They are extremely vulnerable people. So we need to have a closer look. I'm not I wouldn't go as far as saying it shouldn't be taxed, or because I know there's several issues with respect to the supply chain and how things, come into the country. If they're not made in the country, they need to be imported, or even things that are made in Nigeria. But I do know that we have a responsibility. And by us, I don't just mean you and I also mean the government, I mean responsible corporations or responsive corporations who understand, who are sensitive enough to feel the pulse where the need is, and who have the money to move those resources to where that need actually is. So I feel that, yes, we do have a responsibility to ensure that the areas where this need is felt, very greatly, and it is obvious that it can't be afforded, and these are the areas where the impact of some of these policies might be felt the most. We need to pay attention to that. I spoke to you about schools. Many of our public schools suffer from these things that we mentioned, the lack of privacy for restrooms, adequate restrooms, waste disposal, water, and then even the products themselves. So some children, in the same way as you have the school meal, for instance, being a kind of respite for children who are needy, you understand, who come from vulnerable backgrounds, there should be provision as well, for period products in schools for children who cannot afford them. So what would this do? A child who wakes up in the morning and realizes, oh my goodness, I'm on my period and I don't have anything to use, not even, I don't have money for sanitary pads. And she just like you said, some people will say they want to use rags or something, which obviously she can't use at school. How many times she's going to have to change? She can't do that at school. But if she knows that when I get to the school, I'm supposed to meet such and such, maybe the counselor or somebody who will give me enough products to last me for the 3 to 5 days that I'm going to be bleeding, she's not going to want to miss school, which is what eventually happens at the end of the day. These girls will stay home. They stay home using the rags or things that they can just lay their hands on, because they won't be exposed, they won't get stained. And even if they do, in the privacy of their homes, they can quickly change. But if that happens in school, it's a huge scandal. So I do believe that there needs to be more attention diverting these resources to where they are most needed, and where the impact of their availability will be most felt.
Thank you
We can
so
still keep
much.
the free condom. That helps too. That works.
All right, then. Speaking about attention, let's move over to talking about cramps. Now, Dr. Folu, I need you to explain it to a 5-year-old. Explain it to somebody listening like he or she is 5-year-olds. What are menstrual cramps?
Menstrual cramps are the pain that comes from contraction of the uterus during the menstrual period. Okay, so what happens is that there's some substances, that like chemical substances in the body that are produced in some increased quantity, all right, around the time of the period. So maybe I should just back up a little and talk a little about menstruation. And, menstruation itself is what we call the shedding, of the inner lining of the uterus. And it's cyclical. It happens periodically. the cycle length varies. It can be as low as, in some cases, 21 days, and it can be as high as even 28, some cases 35 days. Okay, but the average is about 28 days. A 28-day cycle is pretty much average. Okay, so now every month, hormones, feed, those are chemical substances. They contribute to building up the inner lining of the uterus. And this is preparatory for implantation of a fertilized ovum. So anticipating that a pregnancy is going to take place, and that inner lining of the uterus will require preparation to be able to receive a fertilized ovum, and then from there the baby will develop. Now, when that doesn't happen, when no fertilized ovum exists, and then the body now realizes, oh, no baby is coming, so I need to get rid of all the padding that I've put in place because there's no baby coming. So, still controlled by hormones, the body now starts to get rid of that inner lining, and it comes out as blood. Now, one of the things that is very much in high quantity around that period is a chemical substance that is called prostaglandin. Now, that causes some form of inflammation, swelling, it causes pain, because when there's swelling, the structures get squeezed or compressed, so one will feel pain. Then, in addition to that, the prostaglandin also causes the uterus to contract, to be squeezed. And the essence of this is also to push out the stuff that we're trying to evacuate from the uterus. Now, when the uterus is squeezed, there is a kind of cutting off of the blood supply to the uterus, even though it's a brief one, just like squeeze and release. So you find people saying they have throbbing pain, or intermittent pain or pulsating pain, that kind of thing. So it's just because the uterus is, being squeezed intermittently and released to push out the contents, So when it's squeezed, there's no blood supply. Anywhere that there's no blood supply, it's just like tying your finger. You tie your finger, you feel pain when no blood goes there. Then after a long while, if you still leave it tied, then it starts to feel dead, So that's the kind of explanation I can give to it. And then, of course, the blood is trying to come out through what is a narrow orifice. That also will require some pain, to cause some pain, So imagine the quantity. Sometimes people even have clots. So imagine a clot size trying to come out of a very narrow orifice. That's the entrance of the uterus. So yes, those are things that can cause pain. Now, this pain that I've described to you is in a normal situation without any other intervening factors. But there are other things that can cause maybe increased severity of pain during periods, but that's not what I was talking about. I'm just talking about what the normal or physiological pain, which we call primary dysmenorrhea, with no other intervening factors.
Thank you so much. I'm sure the 5-year-old understands better now. We will go back to that part you did not want to go initially. That is what the causes the causes of the severity, or what determines the level of the severity. But before we go to that quickly, now, because of something you mentioned, some people have been manipulated and taken advantage of, and that is, the blood being forced through a smaller orifice. Now, you would hear things like, oh, you are experiencing so much pain because your hymen has not been broken, or you would hear things like, oh, it's easier for those who have had a baby. So is there any truth to this?
Okay, with respect to the hymen issue, so the hymen is actually quite far from the orifice I was talking about. So the hymen is actually at the vaginal opening. The orifice I was mentioning is still further in, which is the os, the os of the uterus, the cervical os. Now, so if with respect to the second part of your question, that maybe after having a baby, is it better? Many people do admit to the fact that yes, after having a child, the dysmenorrhea tends to be reduced. But I cannot say categorically that it happens in everybody. In fact, it doesn't happen in everybody, that it reduces after. But yeah, I could say that there's probably a little bit of maybe, and it could even be that there's more tolerance. You understand? I mean, if you have pushed out a
The
whole
pain
human being,
threshold, yeah.
you know, exactly. So you might be less troubled by the pain of dysmenorrhea. But it can actually be, especially in secondary dysmenorrhea, it can be quite crippling, even for people who have had, multiple births. So that wouldn't be something for us to rest too heavily on. And then with respect to people who are sexually naive, who haven't had intercourse before and are virgins, there shouldn't be much difficulty for the blood to come out from the vagina, because the hymen itself is perforated to allow things to come out. In very rare cases, you have people who are born with an imperforate hymen, which means that that tissue, which is called the hymen, doesn't even allow even fluid to come out. That can happen in a few people. And if that happens and they have a lot of pain during their periods, there's a procedure that can be done to open it up to allow the outflow of blood. It's not meant to keep blood in there. But when it comes to using, for instance, using tampons, during for somebody who has not had intercourse before. So the hymen, it may be it's stretchable, okay? So it could open it up. But even if a tampon goes in, that doesn't amount to sexual intercourse. So the person is, virginity, maybe it's also one of the mental models that we need to deal with. Virginity is not an event or, an incident. It's a state. So if you haven't had intercourse before, then you're a virgin, whether you use tampons or not. The tampon itself does not make you less of a virgin. By the way, many women with the level of activity that young ladies and young women are exposed to today, most people will have had their hymens, removed even by all that act. I'm not talking of sexual activity now. I'm talking of things like
Exercise.
jogging, riding,
Yes.
bicycling, exercise,
Yes.
all sorts of things. It was back in the day when women were treated like canaries in a cage, that they weren't allowed to do anything. Those women, yes, you probably will put butter on them and come back and meet it there the same way the following month. But these days, our young ladies are extremely active, soccer stars, music stars, doing all sorts of choreography and all that. Those are not the kind of people they're expecting to have one thick hymen in place that is not going to move, So,
Thank you very much for that.
Yeah.
Crystal clear education. There was no way that I could have, asked that question in a way that would have helped bring out that, but you did so much justice to it. Thank you. And Cruz says, there goes the education that is grossly lacking. Yes, exactly the aim of this conversation. We'll take a short breather, and when we come back, we will talk more about what determines the level or the severity of the menstrual cramps that women go, and what you can do as a father, a mother, a brother, sister, uncle, and anyone who has a woman going through such in their environment. You're listening to Soul Sisters, where we talk about issues that women face, and definitely this is one of it. We'll be right back.
This is Mr. C, and you're listening to Smooth 98.1.
Thank you so much for that. It was perfect.
What you enjoy, you need, especially on YouTube.
Sure need a plan, like the Airtel Super Beach plan.
You're welcome.
Because that is so needed. That is, man. So you talk with some people and you hear their perspective on the issue, and you're like, what? Have you been living under a rock? Oof.
I get you.
But then again, you can't blame them, because it's the level of education that they had and the things that were handed down to them from generations to generations.
Exactly. And that's why I called it a mental model, and it really needs dealing with.
Yeah, maybe we'll have a whole episode talking about virginity, just maybe. We're coming back in.
Okay.
What is served right now is Soul Sisters, and it has been a very good one, if I say so myself. Thank you for listening to Smooth 98.1. It's 45 minutes past 11 o'clock, which means we have 5 more minutes. Unbelievable, to deal with the topic of menstruation, the stigmatization, which we have addressed, the period poverty education, and a host of other things. We have talked about what menstruation is, in case you did not understand it, and the everything that goes into it, and as well as the cramps that comes with it. You can send your messages quickly to WhatsApp 0809-444-0981. Again, 0809-444-0981. Charles from Lekki says, good morning to the ladies in the studio. I grew up with the mentality that period is dirty. Now I have come of age and I changed that mentality. So talking about period stigma, the dirty aspect of it must be treated very well, and making it something that shouldn't be talked about openly, even among brothers and sisters, has to be treated as well. And you bet we have treated that this morning on the show. Thank you so much for being my guest, Dr. Folu. But going further, you talked about cramps and the things that the possible things. No, you were just about to talk about it. The things that can aggravate the level of pain that a woman goes through when she's on a period.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I said that we have two different types of period pains, and period pains are actually called dysmenorrhea. So we have the primary and the secondary. Now, the primary is what I referred to before, where you have there's no underlying issue apart from the fact that this woman is having her physiological or her normal monthly cycle. Okay. And I explained already what causes the pain there. Now, with respect to the secondary dysmenorrhea, there's so many things that can cause it. One of them is the fact that some people can have structural abnormalities of the uterus, and they could be born with these. If this happens, there could be maybe like an obstruction to the outflow tract, and I mean that obviously will cause pain when the blood is attempting to go out through. Just a minute, please. Okay, so in addition to that, people could have abnormalities to the structure that are acquired, like for instance, fibroids. Okay, so people have uterine fibroids. Excuse me.
Okay. While I wait for her to come back, I will take these messages on WhatsApp. There is Charles Chidozie who says, funnily enough, we were having a conversation late last night, thinking if there were possibilities where a woman is permitted to see her period once a year, or switching on her menopause now that she has no need for her period. But what do we know? Only if wishes were horses. Now, talking about that menopause, there are actually things that come with it. But that is a talk for another day. Then Cruz on WhatsApp again says, I think the meat education has also been courtesy of our religious understanding and practices. Those that know better need to speak up in the religious gatherings and micro societies. Thank you. All right, Dr. Folu.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for that brief break. Okay, so yeah, there could be other abnormalities in the structure, like acquired along the way, like people have uterine fibroids. So uterine fibroids affects the period in many ways, apart from the fact that it can affect the outflow, of the menstruum. The fact that the fibroids are also there. The uterus, I said that there has to be some contraction. When it contracts and the fibroids in the way, the fibroids too will, be cut off from their normal blood supply, pain, even in more intensity than a non-fibroid uterus. Then you can have other things like endometriosis, which is where you have the lining of the uterus appearing in other places where it shouldn't appear, and this can cause scarring and other things. And that means that when the woman is menstruating, and even at other times when she's not menstruating, what is going on in the uterus during menstruation is happening all over the pelvis, and this causes what we call chronic pain, and it can be very, very debilitating. Okay, so there are other things like infections, anyone who has a pelvic inflammatory disease, or other infections, could have period pain. Now, what can you do to prevent period pain? Now, if it is from any of those acquired causes that I said can lead to secondary dysmenorrhea, such a person needs to get to see a doctor, and of course, try to remove those intervening factors. But if it's a primary dysmenorrhea, there are a few things. First of all, we know that women who exercise a lot have less period pain. So we should encourage our young ladies, to be active. Sedentary lifestyle is one of the banes of modern society. Everybody working from home, remote worker, sitting at your workstation, like all day, you could probably be in front of, your device. Yeah. So, and that's what happens. So a lot of people are not as active, as people used to be before, but we need to encourage our young ladies to get out, to be more active, and it actually helps. Then definitely things like alcohol, cigarette smoking should not be encouraged because they also are inflammatory in activity. So people that take more of those will tend to have more period pains. Then simple analgesics, paracetamol, ibuprofen, those can help. And especially, if you take it, like if you are able to actually time your period and know when it's coming, take it like a day before or the very morning when you're expecting your period, kind of anticipatory. And then you take it and the inflammation, starts to go down as soon as, it is, starts to pick up. The drugs are there to bring it down. So rather than waiting until it reaches its peak and then one is now debilitated already and then now start to look for pain relievers, they might not be able to pick it, up at that point. Then other things like using a hot water bottle. I find it interesting that many people do not know that this can actually be helpful because we used to read Mills and Boons in those days and it was always there, So I find out that, many people don't know that just application of heat therapy, either with a blanket, an electric blanket or an actual hot water bottle can relieve some of the pain, of periods. Yeah, so there's so many other things. Some people talk about foods, herbs, so but essentially, I think that is mainly what can be used
I
to
wish we
alleviate
could
the
go
pain. I
on.
know time is short. I
Totally
know.
up. We should have a second part of this. And definitely in that conversation, we will talk about virginity and menopause and
Okay.
some other things too that are as a
Okay.
result of social construct. And yeah, we need to get educated. Thank you
Yeah,
so much.
I mentioned it earlier. I said it's majorly culture and religion. So he was right. The person that made that comment was really right. It's, cultural and religious biases that have been ingrained so deeply into us.
Thank you. Charles on WhatsApp says this show must not end. Sorry, unless you want to pay the bills. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Folu. Are you active on social media?
I am. I'm Dr. Folu on Twitter, and I think on Instagram I have the same handle. Doctor as a DOCTOR Folu. Yeah, I think
All
that's
right. Everything she said. So please check her out there. And let's keep the conversation going. While World Menstrual Hygiene Day might be on 28th of May, but then this advocacy is all through the year. So keep the conversation going on social media at Smooth981 FM and then use the hashtag Soul Sisters 981. I can't thank you enough for your time today and all that you have given to us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for bringing the conversation out. God bless.
Our pleasure. Thank you. Now, in a couple of seconds, you'll be listening to the news at 11:55. And after that, it will be more soul soothing songs on Strictly Soul. This is Smooth 98.1. Thank you so, much. It was absolutely a delight. Yeah. Like I said, we should have a second part of it. We'll come up with what we're talking about. And then, yeah, we will have a blast. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Anything related to women's health, I'm an adolescent health specialist. So children, adolescents, yeah. So, or the family, anything.
Yeah,
I'm
I
good.
got that locked now. Thank you so much. Have a lovely day.
You too. Bye.